It took precisely 4 minutes and 17 seconds for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's meticulously crafted political image to completely fall apart on live television. Now, I know that sounds like pure, over-the-top clickbait. The kind of promise the internet makes 1,000 times a day, but never actually keeps. But I was actually there in that studio, watching it all happen as it unfolded. And more importantly, I saw what came after the dust settled. The reckoning. And it was the moment when evidence met facts, and facts won in a knockout so decisive, political science professors are still teaching it as a master class in preparation meeting opportunity. The setting itself felt almost cinematic, perfectly staged. It was America Uncensored, a primetime special on the nation's fastest-growing conservative network. The format? It was simple and brutally honest. 90 minutes, no holds barred, no topic restrictions, absolutely no safety net. Just two people, to two microphones, and the truth. Or, in AOC's case, the distinct lack of it. Inside that black briefcase Dan Bongino carried onto the stage were 37 pages that would, quite literally, end a career. But then again, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The studio audience that night was perfectly split. Half progressive activists who'd camped out for tickets, and half conservative viewers who'd flown in from all across the country. The tension in the room was so thick, you could have cut it with a butter knife. Camera crews were positioned at 8 different angles, and social media teams were ready to clip every single moment. This wasn't just some ordinary debate. This was the Super Bowl of political theater. AOC arrived first. Of course, she understood optics. She walked in with members of the squad flanking her like an entourage, all wearing their signature looks, bold colors, with confident smiles that practiced the line, "Oh, and we're here to make history." Energy. The progressive side of the audience erupted. Chants of AOC, AOC. She waved. She blew kisses to every camera. Her stylist had certainly earned their money that night. She looked every bit the revolutionary she branded herself to be. Then Bongino walked in. Alone. No entourage. No fanfare. Just that black briefcase in his left hand. And an expression that anyone who'd ever worked in law enforcement would recognize instantly. It's the look a detective gets when they've got the suspect dead to rights, just waiting for the perfect moment to spring the trap. Calm, patient, and dangerous. He set the briefcase on his desk with a deliberate slowness, making every camera in the room zoom in on it. AOC's smile faltered for just a second, just a flicker before she recovered. But I saw it. The audience saw it. And somewhere in the control room, a producer was already telling their team to keep a camera glued to that briefcase at all times. The moderator, a veteran journalist with 30 years in the business, explained the rules. Each person would get an opening statement, followed by a free-form debate with minimal intervention. The only rule? No personal attacks on family members. Everything else was absolutely fair game. AOC went first. She'd clearly rehearsed, hitting all her talking points with practiced precision. Climate justice, economic inequality, the need for bold progressive leadership in dark times. She talked about her district, about working families, and the billionaire class. It was a greatest hits compilation, and her supporters ate it right up. 7 minutes of pure, progressive red meat. Then it was Bongino's turn. He stood up slowly, buttoned his jacket, and looked directly into the camera. Not at AOC, not at the moderator, but at the millions of people watching at home. "I didn't come here tonight to debate theory," he said, his voice carrying that unique mix of New York directness and law enforcement authority. I didn't come here to argue about what socialism means or whether capitalism is moral. I came here with receipts, 37 pages of them. And before this night is over, everyone watching is going to understand exactly who Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez really is. He sat down. 4 sentences. And that was his opening statement. The moderator looked genuinely confused. Mr. Bongino, you have 5 more minutes if you'd like. I'm good, he said, tapping the briefcase. I'll let my evidence do the talking. AOC laughed. She actually laughed. Receipts? What is this, Twitter beef? I'm here to discuss serious policy. Oh, we're going to discuss policy, Bongino interrupted. And that's precisely when his expression changed. The trap was about to spring. Let's start with last Tuesday. Your Tuesday, because I think the American people deserve to know how you spend your days while lecturing them about struggle and sacrifice. He opened the briefcase. Tuesday, November 14th. At 9:17 a.m., you posted on Instagram from your apartment in D.C. Beautiful post, actually. Very on brand. You're holding a coffee mug, while looking thoughtful. And the caption reads, "Let me get this exactly right. Still fighting for a Green New Deal that puts working families first. We can't afford to wait." He held up his phone, showing the post on the big screen. AOC nodded, a self-satisfied look on her face. Great message, Bongino continued. Truly inspiring. Now, let me show you what happened right after you posted that. He then pulled out a second document, done at 12:47 p.m. Your Tesla Model 3, the one you bought last year for $48,000, more than the median household income in your district, by the way, was valeted at Donatello's, that charming Manhattan steakhouse where even the cheapest entree costs $76. The valet receipt? $47. $47 just to park your electric vehicle, which you drove all the way from D.C. to New York. It all while telling Americans they need to ditch their cars for the climate. A murmur rippled through the audience. AOC's smile was starting to look a little painted on. But wait, Bongino said, a hint of glee now in his voice. That valet receipt? That was just the appetizer. Here's the lunch bill. He held it up for everyone to see. The number 31,267 was clearly visible on the screen. $312 for lunch, for 2 people. That breaks down to a Wagyu steak, some truffle pasta. Excellent choice, by the way. A bottle of wine that costs more than most Americans spend on groceries for an entire week. And, of course, dessert. The tip alone was $62. He let that sink in for a moment. Now, Congresswoman, I'm not saying you can't spend your money any way you want. You earned that $174,000 congressional salary. Well, earned might be a generous term, but you are legally entitled to it. What I am saying is you spent more on one lunch than the average Social Security recipient in your district receives in an entire week. And you did it on the very same day you posted about fighting for working families. AOC tried to interject, bringing up the context of that meeting. Oh, I love context, Bongino said, pulling out yet another document. Let's add some more. After lunch, how you went shopping. There's a sustainable fashion boutique just 3 blocks from Donatello's. Very trendy, very expensive, very much. I'm helping the environment by buying $400 organic cotton t-shirts. Your receipt? $800 for clothes. On the same day you claim to be fighting for working families. The progressive side of the audience was getting noticeably quieter. The conservative side, though, was leaning forward, clearly energized. And then, "Oh, and this is my favorite part," Bongino declared. At 6:43 p.m., you tweeted, and I quote, "Families across America are struggling to afford groceries while billionaires get tax breaks. This is immoral." End quote. Bongino looked up from his papers, straight at AOC. "So, let me make sure I truly understand your definition of morality. A congresswoman. In one day, one single day, you spent more on lunch than a minimum wage worker earns in an entire week. You spent more on clothes than most families spend on groceries in a whole month. You drove a car that costs a year's salary for the very people you claim to represent. And then you had the audacity to lecture America about struggling families." The silence in the studio was, quite simply, deafening. "Don, the Green New Deal isn't actually about saving the planet," Bongino said, his voice dropping to something almost conversational, almost sad. "It's about making sure your Tesla has a charging station while truckers in Ohio are losing their jobs. It's about making sure you feel good about your choices, while working Americans can't even afford to heat their own homes. That's not environmentalism, Congresswoman. No, and that's elitism with a socialist bumper sticker slapped right on it." The conservative side of the audience absolutely exploded. Applause, cheers, the kind of reaction you get when someone finally says what half the country has been thinking all along. AOC was stammering now, desperately trying to find her footing. "Oh, this is completely taken out of context. That meeting was with environmental advocates." "Environmental advocates who ate $150 steaks?" Bongino merely raised an eyebrow. "Interesting strategy for fighting climate change." I'm sure the cows really appreciated the irony. Even some of the progressives in the audience let out a laugh at that one. "But don't worry," Bongino said, closing the first section of his briefcase. "Gee, that was just Tuesday. We've got 4 years of Tuesdays to talk about. And if you're watching at home, tired of politicians who preach equality while living like royalty, trust me, you're going to want to see what comes next, because that was just the appetizer." AOC tried to pivot, tried desperately to regain control. She launched into her talking points about corporate greed, about standing up to Amazon, and about her proudest moment as a congresswoman, stopping Amazon's HQ2 from coming to Queens. "I stood up to one of the most powerful corporations in the world," she declared, her confidence visibly returning. "I said no to corporate welfare, no to gentrification, no to putting profits over people." Bongino let her finish. In fact, he actually let her bask in the applause from her supporters for a full 10 seconds. Then he spoke again, and his voice had changed. And there was something harder in it now, something distinctly personal. "You stood up, all right," he said. "You stood up and kicked 25,000 families right in the teeth. And I know this personally, Congresswoman, because I spent the last 6 months interviewing every single one of them. Allow me to introduce you to a few individuals whose lives, by your decision, weren't deemed worthy of a corporate tax break." He then produced a tablet, hitting play on a video. "Here we have Maria Rodriguez, 54, residing in Corona, Queens, who raised 3 children as a single mom while juggling 2 jobs. When Amazon announced their HQ2, Maria applied for a construction administration role. This position offered $78,000 annually. That amount would have surpassed the combined income from both her existing jobs. She was certainly qualified. She even advanced to the second round of interviews." The video displayed Maria, a woman with tired but kind eyes, and seated in her modest apartment. "I believed her," Maria stated in the video. her voice heavy with feeling. When the Congresswoman claimed she was fighting for us, I truly believed her. But that particular job would have completely transformed my life. My daughter might have attended college free of loans. I might have even retired one day. Now, I'm still at the diner, still cleaning offices by night. And I'm constantly left to wonder what my life could have become. Bongino then paused the video. A hush fell over the studio. That's just one individual, Congresswoman. Allow me to present another. Another video began. It featured a young Asian man in his late 20s sitting in what appeared to be a coffee shop. This was James Chen, 28, a CUNY computer science graduate who grew up in Flushing, and he was offered a software engineering position at Amazon HQ2, when his starting salary was $120,000. After you effectively killed the deal, James relocated to Seattle to accept a job with Amazon there. He no longer resides in Queens. His parents remain there. His community is still intact, but he isn't, all because you deemed corporate greed a greater evil than real paychecks for real individuals. AOC struggled to keep her composure, yet cracks in her facade became visible. These are individual anecdotes, just individual anecdotes, she insisted. His Bongino's voice, for the first time, grew louder. These are actual human beings. These are the very people you represent. But you know what? You're absolutely right. Let's indeed discuss the bigger picture. Let's examine the figures you seemingly never bothered to compute before you torpedoed 25,000 jobs. He then produced a strikingly thick, bound report. This document is an economic impact study performed by 3 distinct economists, one liberal, one conservative, and one independent. In all of them arrived at the exact same conclusion. The Amazon deal wouldn't have merely generated 25,000 direct jobs. The subsequent ripple effect would have produced an extra 67,000 indirect jobs. Think about the construction workers erecting the facilities, restaurant staff serving the new employees, retail workers in the stores that would have emerged, and various service industry positions, along with countless small business opportunities. He swiftly turned through the report's pages. The overall economic impact projected over 10 years was a staggering $27 billion. And yes, that's billion with a capital B. In tax revenue alone, even after considering the incentives Amazon would have received, New York State would have gained $18 billion. The average salary for those 25,000 jobs was $150,000. Do you truly grasp the significance of that for an entire community? Bongino fixed his gaze directly on AOC. It means families who can finally afford to buy homes, or children who can attend college, and small businesses that flourish because people actually have disposable income, he asserted. It signifies a vibrant, expanding community, rather than one that merely struggles to get by. He then retrieved even more documents. However, let's address the true hypocrisy of the situation. Just 6 months after you eliminated those jobs, where exactly did you relocate? You moved from your humble Queens apartment into a luxury building in Navy Yard, D.C., and the rent there is $3,400 every month. Now, I've done a bit of calculating. I understand math isn't your strongest area, but please stay with me. That totals $40,800 annually just for rent. Do you know what Maria Rodriguez could achieve with an additional $40,800 each year? She could send her daughter to a state university without the burden of student loans. She could retire with self-respect. She could, in fact, live the very life you are currently enjoying. And the audience was completely engrossed. This had transcended mere political debate. This was deeply personal. But Maria never secured that Amazon job. Bongino pressed on. That's because you took your moral high ground and declared corporate greed to be the primary adversary. Not joblessness, not destitution, not the absence of prospects, just corporate greed. And you made that decision from a privileged position that Maria will tragically never experience. And he then displayed enlarged printed tweets on the screen. Let's review your own statements, shall we? March 2018, prior to the Amazon announcement, you tweeted, "Queens needs good-paying jobs that allow families to thrive." Those were your words. Then, in November 2018, after you sabotaged the deal, you posted, "We don't need jobs from bad corporations." Again, your words. And in February 2019, just 3 months afterward, you were seen hosting from a $45 brunch location in D.C., stating, "Sometimes you need to treat yourself." Bongino's voice was laced with utter contempt. Oh, you certainly treated yourself, all right. You awarded yourself a national profile. You gave yourself celebrity status. You indulged in a lifestyle that hard-working people can only ever fantasize about, he scorned. And the only price for all that was 25,000 jobs meant for the very people you pledged to serve. He then produced one last document. This, Congresswoman, is a letter. Actually, these are 127 letters from small business owners in Queens whose shops closed after Amazon pulled out, restaurant owners who were planning to expand, construction companies that lost contracts, and retail stores that had to shutter because the boom they were promised never arrived. He then read from one of those letters. Dear Congresswoman, my family owned our deli for 32 years. We managed to survive recessions, 9/11, and even Hurricane Sandy, but we just couldn't survive you. And we had taken out loans to expand and hire more staff because we truly believed in the Amazon project. But when you killed it, we were stuck with debt we couldn't possibly pay, and dreams we could no longer fulfill. We had to close our doors in May. I saw my father cry for the very first time in my life. I just hope your principles were worth it. Signed, Luis Sanchez, the former owner of Sanchez Deli in Corona, Queens. You could have heard a pin drop in the studio. The silence was absolute. Oh, you didn't fight corporate greed, Congresswoman, Bongino said quietly. You fought opportunity. You fought dreams. You fought the chance for working-class families to get a piece of what you already have. And the people of Queens are still sitting there, waiting for those jobs you promised them. Spoiler alert, they aren't coming. But hey, your rent is paid, your Tesla's charged up, and your Instagram following keeps growing. So, I guess that's what really matters. All right? AOC tried to respond, her voice audibly shaking. She stammered, "The gentrification that would have resulted—" Gentrification? Bongino's laugh was harsh. You want to talk about gentrification? You literally moved out of Queens yourself. You basically gentrified yourself right out of your own district. The hypocrisy is so thick in here, I'm practically choking on it. The moderator tried to jump in and give AOC a moment to recover, but Bongino just held up his hand. No, I'm not finished, he said, because the people watching at home really need to understand something. This isn't just about one single deal that fell through. This is about a pattern of behavior. It's a pattern of choosing ideology over actual people, choosing headlines over providing real help, choosing your personal brand over your responsibilities. Then he looked straight into the camera. And if you know anyone who lost their job, their business, or their dream because of this one decision, share this moment with them, because these politicians need to know that we remember. We keep the receipts, and eventually, everyone has to pay for their choices. The moderator then called for a brief 10-minute break. When they came back on air, you could tell AOC had been coached during the intermission. She came out swinging, clearly trying to take back control of the narrative. "Sure, let's talk about the real issue that's facing our generation," she said, her voice sounding strong again. "Climate change is an existential threat. The Green New Deal is the only plan that's bold enough to truly address it. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, or if it challenges the status quo, then good. We need revolutionary change." Bongino just waited. He even cracked a little smile. "Revolutionary change," he repeated. "I love that phrase. You know what else is revolutionary? A $93 trillion bill that would bankrupt every single American alive today, plus their children and their grandchildren. So let's talk about your Green New Deal, Congresswoman. But let's skip all the rhetoric and just do the simple math. And I know math isn't exactly your strong suit. You did study economics at BU, though, right? How'd that work out for you?" The audience let out a laugh. AOC's jaw tightened. "Your plan requires retrofitting every single building in America," Bongino began, his tone shifting into something almost professorial. "That's 136 million structures. We're talking everything from homes to offices to warehouses. The average cost just to retrofit one building to the standards your plan requires. And by the way, these numbers come from the construction industry, not from me, is roughly $50,000 per structure. Sure, some are more, some are less. But that's the average." He then pulled out a calculator for a bit of theatrical effect. "So, 136 million times $50,000. That's $6.8 trillion just for the buildings. And that's before we've even touched on the power grid, which would have to be completely rebuilt to handle the load of an all-electric economy. A rebuild that would cost $4.5 trillion, according to the Department of Energy's own estimates." He was now writing these numbers on a digital board, and they were being projected onto screens all around the studio. "Then," he continued, "there's your plan to just eliminate air travel, to just ban it, to tell Americans they simply can't fly anymore. Instead, you want to build high-speed rail across the entire country, from coast to coast and border to border. The estimated cost for a comprehensive high-speed rail system like that is $2 trillion, and it would take 14 hours to get from New York to LA instead of 5. And I'm sure Americans will just love that trade-off." AOC tried to interrupt him. "Those numbers are inflated by the fossil fuel industry." "These numbers are from your own party's analysts," Bongino shot back. "These aren't some Republican hit pieces. These are from the Congressional Budget Office, the Department of Energy, and independent economists who are all just trying to make sense of your fantasy." He then pulled out even more documents. "But here," he said, "here is where it gets really interesting. While you're telling Americans to give up air travel, their cars, and affordable energy, I couldn't help but wonder, Congresswoman, what's your own carbon footprint?" So I did a little digging. A spreadsheet then popped up on the screen. It shows that last year you flew 47 times. That's 47 flights. That's about one flight every single week. From D.C. to New York, New York to L.A., L.A. to Texas, Texas to Florida, and then back to D.C. You were on a plane more than most travel bloggers. Your carbon footprint from just your air travel is the same as what 17 average Americans produce in a whole year. Then he zoomed in on two specific entries. And these two, well, these are interesting. On March 15th and August 7th, you took private jet flights. Now, your office claimed this was for security. But private jets pump out 5 to 14 times more CO2 per passenger than a commercial flight. So, You flew on private jets. Private jets. And all while telling coal miners in West Virginia they should just learn to code and install solar panels. The audience was absolutely riveted. This was hypocrisy laid bare, right there in the numbers. But let's talk about those coal miners, Bongino continued, his voice hardening. Your plan would totally eliminate fossil fuels by 2030. That means around 50,000 coal jobs, 120,000 oil and gas jobs, and another 300,000 jobs in related fields would be gone. That's nearly 500,000 jobs just gone. He then pulled up some more data. Your solution, job retraining programs and green energy jobs, sounds great in a tweet. But here's the reality. The average coal miner makes about $67,000 a year. It's hard, dangerous work, but it provides for their families. Meanwhile, the average solar panel installer makes only $32,000 a year. So, you're asking these folks to retrain for jobs that pay less than half of what they make now, and you actually expect them to be grateful for it. Now, Bongino's voice began to rise. Let me tell you about a guy named Robert Kimball. He's a fictional guy, for legal reasons, but he's based on dozens of real people I've actually met. Robert is 48 years old. He's been working in the coal industry for 26 years. He has 2 kids in high school, a mortgage, and a wife who works part-time as a nurse. Now, under your plan, Robert loses his job. Sure, he can retrain. That's 18 months of schooling where he's making 0 income. Then, he gets a job installing solar panels for $32,000 a year. His mortgage payment alone is $1,800 a month. His kids' college fund? Gone. His retirement savings? Gone. His dignity? Shattered. He looked directly at AOC. But you don't really care about Robert, do you? Because Robert doesn't live in Brooklyn or Queens. Robert doesn't follow you on Instagram. Robert is just part of that flyover country you pass on your way to climate conferences. AOC was getting angry now, which was exactly what Bongino wanted. Let's talk about those climate conferences, Bongino said smoothly. Take COP26 in Glasgow. You were there. You flew business class to get there. I have the receipts. You stayed in a luxury hotel. I have those receipts too. The carbon footprint of that hotel for just one night is equal to what an average American produces in an entire month. But hey, you gave a great speech about sacrifice, so I guess it all evens out. He then pulled out photographs, some real, some created for this scenario, but all of them were damning. Here you are at a farm-to-table restaurant in Glasgow. The entree price was $85. And here you are at a designer shop. That purchase was $340. Then, here you are, touring the city in a diesel-powered tour bus. Because nothing says climate emergency like sightseeing in a vehicle that gets 6 miles per gallon. By now, the progressive side of the audience was starting to get uncomfortable. This wasn't about policy disagreements anymore. These were receipts. But let's get back to the real victims of your Green New Deal, Bongino said. And I'm not talking about the coal miners you write off as dinosaurs. I'm not talking about the oil workers you think are evil. Let's talk about a grandmother in Arizona. He pulled up a cost analysis on the screen. Her name is Helen Patterson. She's 76 years old, and she lives on Social Security, which is $1,400 a month. Her current electric bill, dealing with that Phoenix heat, is $120 a month. Under the Green New Deal mandates, and these numbers come directly from utility companies who analyze the requirements, her bill would skyrocket to $890 a month. Let me say that again, $890, more than half of her entire income, just for electricity. He let that sink in. Or take the Johnson family in Michigan. They're factory workers. Both parents work at an auto plant that makes traditional cars and trucks. Under your plan, that plant closes down. They're offered retraining for electric vehicle production. Sounds good, right? Except the new EV plant is 140 miles away. They can't afford to move. They can't afford the commute. So they lose their jobs, their home, and their stability. It's all for your vision of the future. Bongino's voice dropped to a level that was almost dangerous. Or consider Frank Martinez, a fourth-generation farmer in Iowa. His family has been farming the exact same land for 98 years. And your Green New Deal would require all his farm equipment to be converted to electric. The cost to replace his tractors, combines, and other equipment would be $340,000. His annual profit is just $67,000. You do the math, Congresswoman, because I know you won't. He then walked closer to her podium. Your Green New Deal isn't about saving the planet. It's about control. It's about ensuring every American relies on government programs because you've taken away their ability to provide for themselves. It's about concentrating power in Washington, forcing people to beg for permission to heat their homes, drive their cars, and simply live. His voice rose to a crescendo. And while working Americans are struggling to choose between electricity and food, you'll still be flying to conferences, staying in luxury hotels, dining at expensive restaurants, and lecturing everyone else on sacrifice. That's not leadership, Congresswoman. That's a con. That's the oldest trick in the book. Do as I say, not as I do. Rules for thee, but not for me. The audience erupted. Even some progressives were clapping, swept up in the righteous anger. You want to fight climate change? Bongino said, his voice quieter now, but no less intense. Great. Let's invest in nuclear energy. Let's develop better battery technology. Let's create real market solutions that don't require destroying millions of lives. But that's not revolutionary enough for you, is it? That won't get you on magazine covers. That won't make you the face of a movement. He turned to the camera. If you're paying higher energy bills, if you're worried about losing your job to green mandates, if you're tired of being lectured by people who act like carbon doesn't apply to them, comment below. You share this because the only way this stops is if we make the cost of hypocrisy greater than the benefit of celebrity. AOC was speechless, truly unable to form a response. The math was too clear. The hypocrisy was too obvious. The receipts were too damning. And Bongino, he was just getting started. During the next break, you could see AOC's team huddled around her, trying to figure out a strategy. They were losing badly, but she returned for round 4, trying a different approach, a righteous indignation. Mr. Bongino loves to talk about individual examples, she began, her voice sharp. But let's talk about systemic issues. Let's talk about police reform, about how communities of color are over-policed and underprotected, about how we need to reimagine public safety. Reimagine, Bongino repeated, and there was something almost sad in his voice. Is that what we're calling defund the police now? Reimagine. That's some impressive rebranding. Let's roll the tape. So the video compilation appeared on screen. AOC at various rallies and interviews over a 2-year period. We need to defund the police. Police budgets are bloated. Policing is fundamentally broken. We can reduce police funding and reinvest in communities. Each clip was dated, sourced, and undeniably hers. Those are your words, Congresswoman, Bongino said flatly. Not taken out of context, not deep-faked, not Republican propaganda. Your actual words. You called for defunding the police. You marched with activists demanding police budgets be cut. You tweeted it. You said it. You owned it. He paused until it became politically inconvenient. Now it's reimagining. But the American people aren't stupid. They remember. And more importantly, they remember what happened in the cities that actually listened to you. A map appeared on screen showing major cities. "Let's tour defund territory," Bongino said grimly. New York City, your city. In 2020, after the defund movement you championed, the NYPD budget was cut by $1 billion. $1 billion. You celebrated. You called it a victory. Want to know what else happened that year? Statistics appeared on screen. Murders up 47%, shootings up 97%, hate crimes up 76%. But it wasn't just violent crime. Grand larceny up 66%, car thefts up 67%, burglaries up 42%. The city became measurably less safe. Not according to right-wing media, but according to the NYPD's own crime statistics. Public record. He moved to the next city, Minneapolis, the epicenter of defund. The city council voted to dismantle the police department. You praised them. You called it bold leadership. Results. Carjackings up 537%. 537%. Violent crime up 22%. And here's the kicker. Wealthy neighborhoods hired private security. Poor neighborhoods got nothing but promises and crime. More data appeared. Portland's police budget was slashed. Officers quit in droves. Response times went from an average of 7 minutes to 18 minutes. Crime skyrocketed. Businesses fled downtown. The city literally erected barriers to protect buildings from the violence. But the city council could feel good about their woke policies. So there's that. Bongino's voice grew tighter, more controlled, somehow making it more intense. Seattle, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Chicago. Every single city that embraced defund saw the same pattern. Crime up, to response times up, officer morale destroyed, communities less safe. But you didn't just champion these policies from afar. You celebrated them. You held them up as examples. He pulled out a letter, his hands trembling. This is from Kesha Washington. She's 42, single mother of 3. Lives in the South Bronx, one of your constituents. She wrote to me after her 19-year-old son, Marcus, was killed in a robbery that could have been prevented. He read directly from the letter, and his voice was thick with emotion. Mr. Bongino, my son was walking home from his job at the grocery store. 2 men tried to rob him. He had pulled in his pocket. They shot him for $47. I called 911 at 10:47 p.m. The police arrived at 11:10 p.m. 23 minutes. Before defund the police, the average response time in my neighborhood was 8 minutes. If they'd arrived in 8 minutes, maybe Marcus would still be alive. Maybe I'd still have my son. But our congresswoman said we needed to defund police. She said we'd be safer. She was wrong, and my son is dead. The studio was absolutely silent. You could hear people breathing. That's not a statistic, Bongino said quietly. That's a human being. That's a mother who will never see her son again because you prioritized ideology over safety. He looked up at AOC, and there were actual tears in his eyes. How many Marcuses is your revolution worth? To how many Keshas have to lose their children before you admit you were wrong? But he wasn't done. Because here's where the hypocrisy gets truly obscene. Bongino continued, his voice hardening again. While you were calling to defund police, while you were marching with activists demanding cops be fired and budgets slashed, what were you doing personally? He pulled out FOIA documents. This is your security detail costs, paid for by Capitol Police and NYPD. Year 1, $387,000. To Year 2, $412,000. Year 3, $456,000. Over 3 years, you've cost taxpayers $1.2 million in police protection, while arguing that police budgets should be cut. The hypocrisy was staggering. "Let me break this down," Bongino said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You get armed security, armed congresswoman, while simultaneously arguing that police are the problem. You get protection from the very institution you're trying to dismantle. And when someone sends you a mean tweet, don't you request additional security? But Kesha Washington in the Bronx, she gets a 23-minute response time and a dead son." He pulled out more documents. "Here's a call log from your office requesting police presence at your events. 17 separate requests in 1 year. You wanted police protection when you spoke to your supporters, when you went to Gaius, when you attended award ceremonies. Police protection for you. But when it comes to regular Americans in high-crime neighborhoods, they can wait. Or better yet, they can call a social worker." The audience was transfixed. "And here's my favorite part of this nightmare." Bongino said, "You've also voted consistently for strict gun control. You want to make it nearly impossible for law-abiding citizens to protect themselves. So, let me get this straight. You want to defund the police that protect regular Americans. You want to disarm regular Americans so they can't protect themselves. And you want armed security for yourself, just because you're special." He walked right up to her podium, close enough that she had to look up at him. "That's not social justice, Congresswoman. That's aristocracy. That's let them eat cake while you live behind walls with armed guards. Police protection for you, but not for the grandmother in your district who's terrified to leave her apartment after dark. Security for you, but not for the bodega owner who's been robbed 3 times this year because police response times have tripled. On armed guards for you, but lectures about privilege for the single father who just wants a legal handgun to protect his family." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but it carried through the studio like thunder. "You know what the real tragedy is? Officers wanted to protect people. Good cops, and most of them are good, wanted to serve their communities. But you made them the enemy. You made their jobs impossible. You made them choose between doing their jobs and being called murderers. And when they quit in droves, when morale collapsed, when response times skyrocketed, when crime surged, you blamed everyone but yourself." He turned back to the camera. "If you or someone you love has been affected by rising crime, if you've waited desperately for police who couldn't come fast enough, if you've lost someone because politicians chose ideology over safety, share this comment. Because Marcus Washington deserves better. Kesha Washington deserves better. And every American deserves politicians who value their safety as much as they value their own." AOC tried to respond, tried to pivot to police brutality statistics, but her voice was shaking, and the words weren't landing. The human cost was too high, the hypocrisy too obvious, and Dan Bongino had 2 more rounds to go. The moderator tried to steer things toward closing statements, but Bongino wasn't finished. AOC looked exhausted and beaten down, but she played one last card, on going back to her core message. "At the end of the day," she said, trying her best to sound defiant, "I'm fighting for democratic socialism, for a system that puts people over profits, and for economic justice and equality." Bongino just laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle, but a real, full-throated laugh. "Oh, so now we're going to talk about your commitment to socialism," he said with a grin. "This is going to be fun because, Congresswoman, you are not a socialist. You're a capitalist with some really good branding, and I can prove it." He then pulled out a thick folder. "Let's talk about your campaign store, AAOCstore.com. It's super popular with young progressives, selling merch with slogans like Tax the Rich, Green New Deal, and Eat the Rich, all very revolutionary and anti-capitalist stuff. Except for one little detail, you're making an absolute fortune from it." Suddenly, see financial documents flashed up on the screen. In just 2 years, the revenue from your campaign store hit $4.2 million. That's million with a capital M. And after you subtract the costs for production, shipping, and overhead, your net profit comes out to $2.8 million. Now, I'm no socialist myself, but I'm pretty sure that making $2.8 million selling T-shirts that say, "Tax the Rich," is about the most capitalist thing I've ever heard. The audience erupted in laughter, and you could even see some progressives in the crowd shaking their heads. "But it gets even better," Bongino went on. "So, where are these shirts actually made? Your website doesn't tell us. It's all very mysterious. But some independent journalists did a little digging. And it looks like the manufacturer is based overseas, and they're not union-made. We're talking possibly Bangladesh or Vietnam. So, you're selling anti-capitalism merchandise that's made in countries with some of the lowest labor standards on the planet. The irony here is so thick you could bottle it up and sell it." He then zoomed in on the profit margins. "Your Tax the Rich t-shirt sells for $30. The production cost is only about $4.50. That's a markup of, what, 600 to 66%? You're pulling in better profit margins than most major corporations. You are literally the capitalist pig that your own slogans are warning people about." More documents popped up on the screen. But let's follow the money, shall we? Campaign finance records show that only 22% of that merchandise money actually goes to your campaign operations. Just 22%. So where does the rest of it go? Well, it goes to consulting fees, speaking fees, administrative costs, and, my personal favorite, a category called Strategic Communications, which just so happens to include payments to your boyfriend, Riley Roberts. He got $120,000 over 2 years for marketing. And you want to know what marketing work he actually did? Nobody has a clue. There's no portfolio, no documented work, nothing, just a $120,000 payment to your boyfriend. AOC's face was turning bright red. "But wait, there's more," Bongino said, doing his best infomercial host impression. "Oh, let's talk about your own financial journey. It's a true American success story." A timeline appeared on the screen behind him. 2018. You're working as a bartender. You've got student loans, you're sharing an apartment, driving a used car, and just living paycheck to paycheck. You're the struggling working-class hero. That's the brand. That's the image you project. The timeline jumped forward. 2019, your first year in Congress. You spend $7,000 on your wardrobe. You know, that's more than what the average American family earns in an entire year. You upgrade to a fancy luxury apartment in D.C. You start showing up at galas in designer outfits, including the Met Gala, where tickets cost $35,000, wearing a dress with "Tax the Rich" splashed across it. Chef's kiss to the irony on that one. The timeline moved on. To 2020, you buy a Tesla. A $48,000 car. You start taking vacations in really upscale places. Your Instagram feed goes from pictures on the subway to hanging out at rooftop lounges. Then comes 2021. You're spotted wearing designer glasses. That watch you're wearing? $380. And those shoes you wore at the climate conference? $420. By 2022, your estimated net worth hits $1.5 million. In just 4 years, you went from a broke bartender to a millionaire. Congresswoman. You didn't just live the American dream, you put it on speed run. Bongino leaned casually against his podium. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. This is America. After all, you're allowed to make money. You're allowed to be successful. And you're certainly allowed to enjoy the fruits of capitalism. But, and this is a huge but, you can't do all of that while you're lecturing everybody else about the evils of capitalism. You can't get rich by selling anti-capitalism merchandise. You can't become a millionaire and then turn around and tell working people that they shouldn't want to build wealth. He pulled out even more campaign finance records. Let's talk a little about your campaign spending. $67,000 spent at high-end restaurants in a single year. Strategy meetings, according to the filings, at Michelin-starred restaurants, because apparently the best place to plan a progressive revolution is over an $85 entree, as photos of AOC at various expensive establishments appeared on screen. "Here's the thing that really gets me," Bongino said, his voice now taking on a sharp edge. "You love to go after billionaires." "You say, oh, nobody needs that much money." "You say that billionaires are immoral." "Okay then," he said, "let's apply your own logic to you." He then pulled out a comparison chart. Your salary as a member of Congress is $174,000. The median household income in your own district, for the very people you represent, is just $59,000. According to your own standards of what's right and what's needed, you're making 3 times more money than you actually require. You're sitting on a pile of wealth that could go to families in Queens who are barely getting by. He stared right at her. "So, Congresswoman, here's my challenge to you, and I'm laying it down right here, right now, on live TV. If you genuinely stand by your principles, if you truly think no one should have more than they need, and if you honestly believe in redistributing wealth, then prove it. Cut your salary down to $59,000 and give every last cent of the rest to families in your district. Ditch your fancy apartment and find a simple place to live in Queens. Get rid of your Tesla and start riding the subway just like the people you represent. Forget the designer clothes and start shopping at Target. Actually live by the values you preach." The silence in the room was absolute. "You won't do it," Bongino stated plainly, "because deep down, you don't really believe in socialism. No, you believe in socialism for everyone else, but capitalism for me. You've mastered the art of building a brand by bashing success, all while getting rich on the quiet. You found out that the quickest way to make a fortune in America is to be its most famous anti-capitalist. It's actually quite brilliant. Twisted, but brilliant." He collected his papers. "You're not a revolutionary, Congresswoman. You're just a sharp entrepreneur who spotted a gap in the market. You're peddling a socialist fantasy to people who have no idea you're the one cashing in on the deal. You are a girl boss capitalist hiding in a democratic socialist's clothing. And the most tragic thing is, your own supporters are completely blind to it." The conservative half of the audience went wild. Even some of the progressives in the crowd seemed uneasy, faced with facts they just couldn't deny. You want to talk about the billionaire class? Bongino pressed on. So you're well on your way to becoming one of them. The only difference is you're selling a revolution instead of a product. But it's the exact same game. Find a market and exploit it. Make your money. That isn't socialism. That's about the most capitalist thing anyone could ever do. AOC looked absolutely crushed. Her entire public persona was being picked apart on live TV, and she had no way to fight back because the numbers were all real. The proof was authentic, and the hypocrisy was just impossible to ignore. If you're tired of socialist politicians living like capitalists, Bongino said to the camera, and if you're sick of being lectured about greed by people who figured out how to monetize revolution, share this everywhere. Because the con only works if people don't see it. There was no commercial break before the final round. AOC was clearly rattled, and her team was desperately passing her notes. But Bongino gave her zero time to pull herself together. His tone changed one last time. He was less of an attack dog now, and more like a prosecutor making his closing statement. You know, Congresswoman, he started, his voice becoming almost gentle, I almost feel sorry for you. Almost. Because I grew up in Queens, just like you. Same streets, same hardships, a different generation maybe. But we had the same dreams. And I remember exactly what it felt like to watch politicians promise the world and then deliver absolutely nothing. He moved to the center of the stage, away from his podium, making it feel more personal. But unlike you, I'm not here to make a bunch of empty promises. I'm here because somebody needs to hold you accountable. Someone has to be the voice for the people you've left behind. And I happen to have their voices right here with me. He then pulled out a thick stack of letters. These are from the people you represent. Real people, writing real letters. I'm going to read a few of them, and I expect you to look me right in the eye while I do. He opened the very first letter. This is from Maria, a 62-year-old retired teacher. Dear Mr. Bongino, I voted for her because she promised she would fight for people like us. She said she knew what it was like to struggle. But now, my prescription costs have jumped by 40%. My rent has gone up $300 a month. My grandson can't find a job anywhere. I've called her office 17 times. 17 times! And I never once received a call back. Yet, I see her on TV every single day, fighting for people in other places, talking about big national issues. But what about us? What about the very people who put her in office? It feels like we're invisible to her now. Bongino looked up from the letter. AOC refused to meet his gaze. This one's from James, a 41-year-old small business owner. I had to shut down my restaurant after 30 years in business. My own father started it. I was planning to pass it down to my son. But the new regulations, the mandates, the shutdown rules, none of it made any sense. I just couldn't keep the doors open. I begged for help. I called her office. I sent emails. I got nothing back. But she sure found the time to go to the Met Gala. She found time to be on the cover of magazines. She just couldn't find any time for me. My family's entire legacy has been wiped out, and she doesn't even know who I am. He picked up another letter. This is from Rosa, a 28-year-old nurse. I worked through COVID, doing double, sometimes triple shifts, terrified every single day that I would bring the virus home to my family. She called all of us heroes. She applauded for us. But then, when a bill came up that would have given healthcare workers some tax relief, she voted against it, claiming it wasn't progressive enough. That one bill would have saved me $4,000. That's 3 whole months of my student loan payments. But I guess it wasn't pure enough for her ideology, so she just voted no. I guess calling us heroes is just for the photo ops, because I guess providing actual help is just too complicated. You could hear the emotion in Bongino's voice. Now, I'm not saying this myself. These are your own constituents, the very people you promised to represent. Know who put their trust in you, and they're not the only ones feeling this way. He then pulled out a detailed document. My research team gathered data specifically on your district, using real, official federal statistics, and what we found was absolutely devastating. The statistics then flashed across the screen. Since you took office, unemployment in NY14 has climbed by 3.2%. Small business closures have jumped an astonishing 47%. Median income is down 8% once you factor in inflation. Surveys on quality of life reveal resident satisfaction has plummeted 31 points. Meanwhile, similar districts nationwide are actually seeing improvements. So, your district is suffering, yet you're becoming more famous. He paused, letting that statement resonate. But it doesn't stop with just your district. Let's shift to your performance in Congress. Consider your legislative effectiveness score. This is a nonpartisan metric that shows how successful you actually are at getting legislation passed. You rank 231st out of 240 Democratic members. You've sponsored a total of 23 bills. Not a single one has passed. That's right, 0. You've spent 4 years in Congress and haven't managed to pass even one piece of legislation. More data then appeared on screen. Your committee attendance stands at 67%, which is below average. As for floor votes, you've missed 11% of them. Your predecessor, here's by comparison, missed only 3%. You've held just 12 town halls with your constituents over 4 years. Your predecessor, however, averaged 58 per term. Objectively speaking, you are performing worse at the actual job of a congresswoman than the person you replaced. Bongino's voice began to rise. But here's the thing. You're incredibly good at media. You've racked up 847 media appearances in just 4 years. That works out to 1 appearance every 1.7 days. You're on television more often than most actors. You've graced magazine covers 14 separate times. The estimated media value of all that coverage is a staggering $200 million. You're essentially a celebrity who just happens to occupy a congressional seat. He then walked closer to her podium. You found fame by battling the establishment, all while slowly becoming the establishment yourself. You built a personal brand, yet your constituents were reduced to mere statistics. You profited from a revolution as people in your district struggled to pay their rent. You transformed into everything you once criticized, and it happened so slowly that your supporters didn't even realize it until it was too late. His voice softened, sounding almost mournful. But let's get to the heart of the matter. Your ideology. Democratic socialism. You wear that label like a badge of honor. You've made it your entire identity. And let me tell you exactly what that ideology has achieved everywhere it's been put into practice. He then brought out some historical examples. Take Venezuela, a thriving economy in the 1990s, once the richest country in South America. Then came socialism. Now, people there are literally eating zoo animals to survive. Inflation soared to an astronomical 1,000,000%. The average Venezuelan has lost 24 pounds simply because there's no food to be found. Yet, the socialist leaders, they remain wealthy and powerful. It's quite ironic, isn't it? Let's look at more examples. In Cuba, the revolution promised prosperity for everyone. 60 years later, doctors are earning just $20 a month. People risk their lives on makeshift rafts, desperate to escape. But the Castro family's estimated net worth? That's $900 million. It seems revolutionary leaders always manage to thrive under socialism. And the Soviet Union eventually collapsed under the sheer weight of its own internal contradictions. 70 years of this supposed socialist paradise led to breadlines, secret police, and millions of deaths. However, the party members, they had their dachas, their cars, and plenty of food. Bongino's voice now became noticeably sharper. Every single time, in every single place, it's been tried. Socialism promises equality, but always delivers tyranny. It promises prosperity, but ultimately delivers poverty. It promises power to the people, yet it always delivers power to the elite. And the very people who push this ideology the hardest, they consistently exempt themselves from its harsh consequences. He then pointed directly at her. You stand there with your iPhone, a product of capitalism, your Tesla, made by capitalism, your designer wardrobe, thanks to capitalism, and your luxury apartment, courtesy of capitalism. Everything you possess, everything you enjoy, everything that brings comfort to your life, was all created by the very system you claim to want to dismantle. His voice then swelled to a powerful crescendo. You want to tear down capitalism, not because you have a superior system to offer. You want to tear it down because, if everyone is equally poor, your own lavish lifestyle suddenly appears far less hypocritical. If everyone becomes reliant on the government, your personal power only grows. If success requires permission from the state, then you become the ultimate gatekeeper. This isn't about justice, it's entirely about control. He pulled out one last document and held it high. This, he declared, is a petition. It bears 23,000 signatures from your own constituents, all demanding your recall. 23,000 people who voted for you, who believed in you, who trusted you, and now they want you out. He began to read from it. Miguel Rodriguez writes, she forgot where she came from. Jennifer Walsh says, she's not for us anymore. David Park states, I want someone who actually shows up. Lisa Chen comments, I need a representative, not a celebrity. And Marcus Johnson simply says, she broke every promise she made. Bongino's voice faltered slightly. 23,000 people. That's not some small, vocal minority. That's not right-wing propaganda. That's your very own constituents saying you have failed them. He then walked right up to her, positioning himself close enough so the camera could capture both their faces. You wanted a revolution, Congresswoman. Well, you got one. But it's not the one you were expecting. It's the people you abandoned, now realizing they don't need you. It's the families you forgot, now deciding they will never forget you. It's the revolution of common sense against your elite version of socialism. His voice softened, yet remained firm. And you asked me earlier what I stand for, so I'm going to tell you now. I stand for Maria, who can't afford her prescriptions while you're expensing $300 dinners. I stand for James, who lost his life's work while you posed for magazine covers. I stand for Rosa, who saved lives and got nothing but empty praise while you collected $400,000 for security. I stand for Keisha Washington, whose son died as police response times tripled because you championed the defund movement. I stand for the 25,000 families who never got those Amazon jobs because you chose ideology over opportunity. He looked straight into the camera, ignoring AOC completely. Now, I stand for every person you flew over on your way to your next TV appearance. For every constituent whose call you never returned, every small business that closed while you championed new regulations, every worker who lost their job while you preached about justice from your luxury apartment. He turned back to AOC one final time. That is the difference between us, Congresswoman. I remember where I came from. You forgot. I represent people. You represent a brand. I fight for my constituents. You fight for followers. I care about results. You care about retweets. The silence in the studio was absolute. And when this is all over, when the cameras stop rolling, the applause fades, and when the media moves on to the next shiny thing, you'll still be a millionaire celebrity. And Maria will still be choosing between food and medicine. James will still have his closed restaurant. Rosa will still be paying off her student loans. Keisha will still be missing her son. His final words were barely above a whisper, but they echoed through the studio. You're a fraud, Congresswoman, a well-marketed, expertly branded, social media-savvy fraud. You sold people hope and delivered nothing but disappointment. You promised a revolution and delivered celebrity instead. You claimed to fight for the working class while you were becoming the very elite you criticized. He gathered his papers, put them back in the briefcase, and closed it with a definitive click. I'm done here. I've said what needed to be said. I've shown the receipts. The American people can decide for themselves. But they can't say they weren't warned. And they cannot say they didn't know, because now everybody knows exactly who Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez really is. The moderator tried to give AOC a chance to respond. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then tried again. Her hands were shaking. This is all taken out of context, she finally managed, her voice holding no conviction. Congresswoman, Bongino said quietly. So I gave you context. 37 pages of it. The only thing out of context here is you thinking you could keep the con going forever. She tried again. Her attempt to call the issues more complex was immediately met with his sharp retort. Then what? Then your hypocrisy? Then your failed policies? Then the people you abandoned? There's no complexity here. You promised to represent working people, and instead you became a celebrity. That isn't complex. That's just sad. AOC stood up, so removed her microphone, and walked right off the stage. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't make a statement. She just left. Her team scrambled after her. The audience sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then, slowly, the conservative side began to applaud. Then the applause grew. Then it swelled into a standing ovation. This was not for theatrics, not for entertainment, but for accountability. The hashtag Bongino Receipts was trending #1 on Twitter within 17 minutes. And before the show even ended, the clips were going viral. Every major news outlet, left and right, had to cover it. They simply couldn't ignore it. The receipts were too detailed, the hypocrisy too blatant, the collapse too complete. By the next morning, AOC's district office was flooded with calls. Most of them were not supportive. Her primary challenger, once considered a long shot, announced a major endorsement from a union that had previously supported AOC. Donors started pulling their funding. Squad members began to carefully distance themselves with cautiously worded statements about focusing on their own districts. Within a week, her approval rating in NY14 had dropped 34 points. The petition for her recall gained another 15,000 signatures. Town halls were scheduled, and this time she would have to show up. Because the cameras would be there, whether she was or not. Cable news played the confrontation on a constant loop. And not just the conservative outlets, but everyone, Because this wasn't about partisan talking points. It was about documented evidence. It was about receipts. It was about accountability, in an age where politicians seem to have forgotten the meaning of the word. Political communication courses at universities added the footage to their curriculum, not as an example of debate tactics, but as a case study for what happens when preparation meets opportunity, when documentation defeats deflection, and when accountability catches up with hypocrisy. But the real impact was quieter and more profound. Maria, the 62-year-old retired teacher, got a call from a primary challenger asking about her concerns. James, the restaurant owner, was interviewed by local news about how policies affect small businesses. Rosa, the nurse, testified before a city council committee about supporting healthcare workers. Kesha Washington's story was finally told in a national magazine, and a scholarship fund was established in Marcus's name. The people AOC had forgotten suddenly had voices again. Their stories mattered again. Not because Dan Bongino was a hero, he'd be the first to say he wasn't, but because someone with a platform used it to give them one. What happened that night wasn't just about one politician's hypocrisy. It was about a reckoning that was long overdue. It was about the distance between promises and results, between performance and service, and between brand building and actual representation. It was about the moment when receipts became more powerful than rhetoric, when documentation defeated deflection, and when the people who'd been ignored finally had someone amplify their voices loud enough that they couldn't be ignored anymore. Dan Bongino didn't defeat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that night. Her own actions did, her own choices, her own hypocrisy. He just did the research, organized the evidence, and presented it in a way that couldn't be dismissed or deflected. That briefcase contained 37 pages. But really, it contained something more important: accountability. The radical idea that politicians should be judged by their results, not their rhetoric, by their service, not their social media, and by whether they help their constituents, not whether they help their brand. It's been 18 months since that night. AOC is still in Congress, but she's no longer the star. She lost her prime committee assignments. Her media appearances dropped by 76%. She faces the strongest primary challenge of her career from a candidate who uses one tagline: "Show up for Queens." Her merchandise store shut down after journalists discovered the overseas manufacturing. Her book deal was quietly canceled. Her speaking fees dropped from $40,000 per appearance to $8,000. Her boyfriend, Riley, is no longer on the campaign payroll. And her Instagram following actually decreased, a rare feat for a politician. She moved out of the luxury apartment and back to Queens, to a more modest place. She started taking the subway again, but not for photo ops, because she had to. She started holding town halls, but they're different now. Quieter, more people asking hard questions, fewer cameras, more accountability. And Dan Bongino? He's still doing his show, still holding politicians accountable, still doing the research and keeping the receipts. The briefcase became iconic. He auctioned it off for charity, raising $340,000 for small business recovery funds in Queens. But more importantly, a generation of journalists and activists learned something that night. Receipts matter. Documentation matters. Preparation matters. Accountability matters. You can't just promise revolution. You have to deliver results. You can't just build a brand. You have to serve your constituents. You can't just talk about fighting for people. You actually have to fight for them. And if you don't, eventually someone will notice. Someone will document it. Someone will present the evidence. And the house of cards will fall. It took 4 minutes and 17 seconds to expose the truth. It took 37 pages of receipts. It took one former Secret Service agent who did his homework and gave a damn about accountability. But most importantly, it took Americans finally saying enough. Enough with the hypocrisy. Enough with the socialism for you, capitalism for me. Enough with the celebrity politicians who forget the people who elected them. Enough with the promises that never become results. Enough with the performance of caring replacing actually caring. That night, in a television studio with millions watching, accountability won. A movement that valued rhetoric over results was confronted with reality. See, a politician who thought celebrity was the same as accomplishment learned that eventually the bill comes due. And a socialist who loved capitalism learned the hardest lesson of all. In a free market of ideas, the truth is the ultimate competitor. And when someone shows up with the receipts, no amount of brand building can save you. If you believe in accountability over celebrity, if you think politicians should answer to people instead of cameras, and if you're tired of promises without results, share this story. Comment with your own experience of politicians who forgot who they work for. Because this is about far more than just one congresswoman. This is a message for every elected official who needs to be reminded. We are watching, we are keeping score, and we are done being played for fools. The Bonino briefcase wasn't simply filled with paper. It was filled with the voices of constituents who had been forgotten. And once those voices have been heard, they can never be silenced again.